I welcome you once again to this evening's edition of One Man Show. I'm your host, your Z-Man, Z Zoltai. Tonight, I'm going to stray from the world of sports and take you into the world of maple sugaring as we visit the maple sugaring days at Hale Farm and Village. We'll step in and watch the art of maple sugaring as it was done hundreds and hundreds of years ago here in Northeast Ohio. Why, after I have my pancake breakfast, I'll stop in and see maple syrup taste testing. We'll talk with a tree. We'll tap a maple tree to see exactly how you drill the hole and hang the bucket for the syrup to drop in. We'll visit with a beautiful white-furred ox, the live kind that actually pulls the cart, and we'll conclude tonight's show as we venture into the sugar house where the whole process is done with a great interview, so you won't want to miss any step of our journey this evening. One Man Show is loaded in the computer back there at the television station. Sit back and enjoy, because One Man Show starts now. Well, hello there. I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome you to another edition of One Man Show and to thank the Smith Brothers Band for writing my snappy theme song that's been accompanying my show now for over 2 seasons here on the television, and especially to Chris Phillips and all of the gang. Secondly now, our first set of clips take us this evening to the blacksmith shop, and our 2 interpretive rangers there will explain how important it was to have a good blacksmith in the villages some 200 years ago on the Ohio frontier here in Northeast Ohio. And while my horseshoeing work leaves a little bit to be desired, I don't think that it takes complete first place. The weather here in Northeast Ohio in springtime, it gets the award for the most shoddy craftsmanship. And can you imagine what it must have been like to be a pioneer some 200 years ago with this kind of unpredictability close to Lake Erie and trying to forge a living on the Ohio frontier? Let's venture on now into the blacksmith shop as maple sugaring days at Hale Farm and Village begins right now.
That's why you don't see a horseshoe one in here. I played horseshoes a time or two. Now, there is a time frame in American history to where the smaller one-owner shops did receive the reputation of being a horseshoer, and that was latter 1800s, early 1900s, when industry, during and post-Civil War, industry was revolving around the log. So to survive, they ended up doing more shoeing, less iron. More shoeing, less iron. And received that reputation about being a horseshoer. And that kind of went on. I mean, there were still shops, number of smiths working in industry outnumbered the horseshoeing variety probably 30 to 1, if not 60 to 1. So it was a big difference. Now, coming into the 1900s, you still had some LO blacksmiths, leftover blacksmiths, that were doing horseshoeing and some iron work. And then about 1920s, 1930s, things started switching back to where you had your blacksmiths and you had your farriers, your horseshoers. There are more horses today than ever has been. And the horseshoeing business, it's a business. I also refer to coffee as thinking juice.
How you can bend that when it's hot. Yeah, names it. Makes it soft.
Now, in the next scene, we're going to watch a young lady who works as an interpretive ranger for the park system show us the art of broom making, just the way they did it a couple of 100 years ago. And I like that handy-dandy little chopper, reminiscent of today's paper cutters with the arm with the big shear. But she's going to show us how they cut the ends of the broom off when they're done. She's going to wrap the brooms, cut the bristles, complete from grasses that are found growing in the wild. And she'll work with some children as they understand and learn the art of broom making next, here on Maple Sugaring Days from Hale Farm and Village on One Man Show. I didn't make this broom. I did buy this one from the store.
And that was to get the cobwebs out of the barn, and to get spiders out, and to get bees' nests out. Ooh. So that when you were working out there in the summertime, you didn't get stung. That was an important job for a young man. To keep the barn. This broom corn that was cut off the end of a broom. So when I'm done with that, I'm going to trim it, right? I can use what's called a fodder cutter to do that. This is a fodder cutter. A broom maker would take, these were called cake testers. Before they made toothpicks, they had broom corn. So they would take broom corn, they'd stick it in the cake. If it came out clean, the cake was done. If it came out sticky, you had to bake your cake longer. See what I'm saying? So ladies would have little bundles of these by their fireplace or their stove, depending on if they had a stove. Now watch this. I put it in my hand, put the string on top, put your thumb on the string, and then twist. It's pretty simple, but you know what? The colder your hands get, the harder it gets to do. Then you tie it 2 times to make a knot. And you can take this home if you want. So, would you like to make your own? Okay.
What I use to make it, please, when they get on the floor, I use this stuff.
You would. That piece is a little dirty and beat up. That piece, you know, that piece is going to be fire kindling.
He likes dirt, don't worry.
Yeah. Do you want to make one, Reed? Yeah, he's going to make
Where's the barn?
I'm going to sweep this floor.
Are you going to sweep this floor?
Yeah.
And the other one around there.
Help the lady?
Now I hope there's a garbage here.
The garbage.
Please.
Okay, we probably have time for one more stop, guys.
We can make a maple house.
Hey, can I keep this?
That's a house.
Did you go to Glassboro?
No, we didn't.
Yeah, I'd go there.
You go
Right
there?
across the street.
Well, it's time for a little tree talk. We're going to find out exactly the basics of tree tapping, and we'll give it a try ourselves. The who, the what, the when, the where, the why, and the how-to-dos of maple sugaring and how to tap the maple tree just to get that sap to run right out where you need it. Now, the tree behind me here is not a maple tree, it's an oak tree, so we won't be tapping any of these bad boys here this afternoon, but we're going to tap a maple tree here coming up. You'll watch how you drill the hole at an angle so that gravity and Mother Nature will take its effect and allow the syrup to drop into the bucket to make some tasty syrup at the end of tonight's show. We're not going to bother any oak trees, but let's go drill some holes in some maple trees as maple sugaring here on One Man Show continues.
Alright, and then I'll help you with yours. Now we've got our special tools. We've got our drills here. Carefully, don't poke your eye out. Now we've got our special tools, or your brother's. Now we've got our tree. Now we need to find a spot on the tree to tap. It needs to be about 2 feet above the ground. So from 2 to 5 feet. Now I'm 5 foot, so can't go higher than me. Go ahead, find a spot on the tree that you'd like to tap into. Here, why don't you hold on to your drill real quick? Here, I'll get it started for you. Now what you want to do is you got to go in at an angle. You see how I'm kind of bringing it down a little bit and going up? That's what you want to do. So go ahead and give that a try. All right, you want to do it right there? All right. Push it. And we're going to go in just like that at an angle. Do you see how I'm doing that? All right, here, why don't you go ahead. Now you got to hold it here, and you got to turn it here. Now you got to push. You got to push into it. That'll help the sap to flow out better. Now you're supposed to make that hole 3 inches deep, guys. You're not getting that close yet.
If you have to go in that far. Don't worry, you're not going to go all the way through the tree.
No, there's nothing to worry about there. You're not. Are you going backwards? No, she did all right. I think my bit's starting to get stripped a little bit there. Very good. Now go put your drills back in the bucket over there, and we'll go to the next step of tapping our tree. Okay. Oh, be careful. Don't poke anybody. That's good. All right. Now you each have a bucket over here. Over here. Let's put your mother in this one. I want you to take this piece out. Do you see that piece? It should be in there. Okay, this is called a spile. You see what this is? See, what we've done is we've essentially, if you want to relate it to something, is pricking your finger.
Oh.
Yeah. Now when you prick your finger, does the blood come gushing out? It shouldn't, ma'am.
Yeah.
Does it though?
No, not gush.
No, but it does drip out a little bit, doesn't it? Yeah. That's the same thing with the tree. The sap's not going to come gushing out ready for us to catch it. It's just going to drip. We don't want to waste any of the dripping sap, so we're going to use one of these so it'll drip right where we want it to. We take our spile. Where's your hole? Is this your hole right here?
Yeah.
What's your name?
Sean.
Sean. Why don't you take this spile, Sean, and put it right here in this hole, okay? Put it right. Oh, wait, hold on. I forgot our hook. Take your hook too. There you go. Go ahead, put it right there. There we go. All right, let go. Let's get that in there. There we go. Let's see you do yours. Do you have your hook? Put your hook right on there. Where's your hole? That one's yours? All right, why don't you go ahead and push that in?
I don't need my desk.
All right, now hang up your buckets.
Get your bucket, Sean.
There are holes. There's a hole in the bucket for that right here. To go on that hook. It goes right on the hook underneath.
All right.
Good
Good
Now
job.
you know what you do? You know what you do now? You wait. And it'll drip. And it'll drip and drip and drip and drip and drip. That bucket that some of you saw over there, did I show you guys that bucket? That's been there a week. So,
That's not a lot of dripping in a week.
no. But then again, our weather hasn't been good.
Do you need warmer weather for that?
We need a little bit warmer weather. By next weekend, hopefully we'll be able to make another batch of syrup.
Okay.
But it needs to be around 40 during the day.
Why do you have the lids on the buckets on some of them?
Oh, to keep the bugs out and mice. Now, we don't really mind so much as maybe a moth getting in there, sugar moths. You just take it out, it gets boiled anyway. Some leaves, but if a mouse gets in there, it ruins it. And imagine that you've waited a week for it to fill up halfway, and then you got to throw it away. That's not good.
Is there any truth to the red squirrels back in Indian days? They used to scratch the trees, and that's how the Indians first found out how to use syrup, because the red squirrels used to scratch
I've
and...
heard that before.
No?
Or a gridiron of some sort. Rake out some coals and put it right on top of there.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so
You're
much.
welcome. You guys have a good day today.
How long have you been doing this?
Have I been doing, I'm sorry?
This part here, the kind of the interpretive
Well,
explanations of the sugaring.
I've been a historical interpreter for 5 years.
Wow, good for you.
This is the first time I've ever worked this program. Normally we had another program running at the same time that I worked. I'm sorry, the smoke's going right in my
No,
eyes.
I don't want that.
So I've been here for 5 years, and I'm also their costumer. So if you ever come out and
Oh.
visit us over in First Person Land, where I work in the summertime, you'll see me, and you'll see all the costumes that I make.
Oh, neat. Well, I hope you're enjoying the show this evening. Maple sugaring. I thought that would be a nice deviation to show everybody how maple syrup was made here in the viewing area a couple of 100 years ago. It's time now to collect the syrup, and it's officially known as sap collecting. We'll collect sap as we help our ox and the cart that he's pulling take the raw, crude maple syrup sap as it dripped from the trees into the buckets over to the sugaring house. Come on along with me now as we go visit with a very beautiful animal and one vintage ox cart.
Sure, come up where he sees you.
Reed, you want to get up in the picture?
Like I say, you always got to be careful just because he has horns, but he wouldn't mean to bump you. Just
You wanna walk
how he
over by
turns his head. You got to watch.
Gabby, please.
Think of all the people he sees, and he genuinely likes people, you know.
Very pretty ox.
Isn't he beautiful?
Yeah.
Even a lot of people, because he has that look, think that kids think he might be a girl, but he is a boy. Look at his look at his, yeah, he is. He's very pretty. Big eyes, and look at his hair.
What do you have that chain right here for?
It's like a dog's collar. Like instead of being around his neck, if you go into the field or you need to walk him across the road, you can hook up like a collar instead of around his neck. That's one way they do it.
That's how you like rope them.
He is so.
Go pet him.
He is very soft.
Go pet him.
Well, I mean I'll lick though. Be careful. Big tongue will come out. He likes people about her size, you know. Kids that size, and he's just looking at them all.
How old is he?
He's about 9.
How long's he been here at Hale Farm?
Oh.
Or do you show him here?
Most of his life, he does stay here.
Yeah.
I've seen pictures of when he was just a calf. So we got him when he was a calf. Now, then he would be hauling all the sap or the sugar water from the trees on the days when we're collecting. On that warm day, we did that route with him 4 or 5 times because it was so much. We could only hold so much at a time, and the fellow that was helping me, Michael, and I did it alone, and we felt like we had climbed a mountain, you know. But he did it real good. If you get ready yet.
Did you see how
He got a big eyeball. He's got a big eyeball.
Well, can you pet the
He's staring at me.
birch again?
Ooh, that's Birch's horn.
I think it's huge.
Do you want me
Dad,
to
you
lift
pet
you
it.
up?
Don't pull it, honey. You can touch it, but don't pull on it.
You sure?
That's just his ear.
Yeah, he can eat a whole lot before coming out. Come out here and chewing the cud. And that's an advantage that horses that just bark.
Well, after all the hard work and drilling the holes in the trees and collecting it with the ox, you gotta take the buckets loaded with the maple syrup from the maple trees to the sugar house. And why go to the sugar house? Because that's where they boil the sap and turn it into this delicious syrup that we've all come to know and love, the sticky sweet nectar of the gods, maple syrup. Who doesn't like to pour some fresh maple syrup onto their pancakes, their French toast, or their waffles? And here at Hale Farm, they even sell pure Ohio maple syrup. Get a shot of that there. And it's from areas such as Kirtland, Burton, other portions of northeast Ohio like Chardon. And they also have it, depending on the week or how the sap is flowing here at Hale Farm and Village, you can actually buy some syrup that came out of the trees at the farm here in the Cuyahoga Valley National Park. But, as I said, before you can enjoy it on your waffles and pancakes and the syrup the way you come to know and enjoy it, oh, that is good. In fact, that's syrup from right here at Hale Farm and Village. It has to be boiled off in the sugar house. Now, all of the smoke that you're about to see is not harmful. It's merely the steam from the moisture being evaporated in the large tank. They pour the maple syrup, as you listen to the interpretive ranger tell us here in a minute. They pour the syrup out of the buckets, the tree sap, into this large tank. And it runs down through this tube, down into this large kettle where it's boiled off. So let's step inside of the maple sugar house now and watch how the final stages and the steps are performed and everything that's connected with making maple syrup. Maple Sugaring Days on One Man Show continues. I'm your host, Z Zoltai. Let's step inside the steamy-filled sugar house. Okay, inside we go.
Good. Have you been around to the
Yes.
sugar bush? Good. Well, this is the end of the process here. Now, I'll give you a question. You have three possible answers: clouds, sugar, or syrup. Okay. So here's the question: what do you think we're making here? Clouds? What do you think now? Sugar?
Looks pretty cloudy.
No, syrup? That's right, we're making syrup. Now, we kind of are actually making clouds too, because what we're doing is we have a fire down here, and we are evaporating water. And so it's kind of like clouds if you see. This is all evaporated water, this isn't smoke. Now, what we have is sap. Did you see the sap in the buckets outside? You have sap in the buckets. Did you see Birch the ox?
Yes.
Yes, you petted the ox, Brooke.
Yeah. Well, we use him for collecting, and we he drops it off back here. We have a big tub. It's kind of like your bathtub at home. Holds a couple 100 gallons. We dump the sap in there, and then there's a copper tube. You can see here it connects to it. We use gravity. Do you know what gravity is? Do any of you children know what gravity is? Who figured out this whole gravity thing?
Isaac Newton.
Apple fell on his head. Newton discovered that gravity, which makes things drop. Well, same concept. The gravity feeds the sap down into this thing here, and this thing here is called a parallel flow evaporator. Big fancy name. Basically, all it is what we use to evaporate, to get the steam going, to evaporate the water out of the sap. Now the reason we're doing that is because to make syrup, you need it to have 66% sugar. When we bring the sap in, it's about 2% sugar. So that's a lot of water we have to evaporate out of it. Now we've only been doing this for a couple hours. We're not really close to making syrup yet today. But if we were, we would come in here, draw some off, pour it out, and it would look like syrup. It'd be darker. You can see there's a little bit of a yellow color to it there. But also, it would pour off and it would look kind of like hot honey. Okay? Now, if we were just making this for ourselves, family and friends, we would see that it looked like it was syrup. We'd taste it, smell it. Good enough for us. Now, if you want to sell it, the maple syrup you buy in the store, that has to be graded 66% sugar. And the way that you do that is with a hydrometer. Same concept as a thermometer, but instead of measuring the temperature, it measures the density or the thickness of the fluid, in this case, of the syrup. So, we would fill up our container here with our syrup, or soon-to-be syrup. If we drop this in and it floated at this red line right here, that would mean 66%. 66% sugar. Now this is not going to be close yet. You can see it goes to the bottom, but it is standing up. So, it's a little bit more thick, but it's got a ways to go yet before we actually have ourselves some maple syrup as it cooks. But there are minerals in it that'll crystallize from the heat, and it makes kind of like sand. And so you have two filters, paper one just like your Mr. Coffee filter at home, and then a felt one. Paper one we just get rid of after we use, the felt one we wash and reuse. And you can see here on the wall, this was from last night. You can see all the grit in it. And this was last night's filter. That's the sugar sand that we filtered out of it, okay? So once you do that, you can go ahead and draw it off into your bottle. You're ready to go. Next thing you'd want to do if you were selling it, though, is to grade it. If you've heard of grades of maple syrup, this is an example of different grades of maple syrup. Here on your right is the most expensive, what you'd pay the most for in a store. It's called Vermont Fancy. And it grades down. You can see the difference is it gets darker as you move to your left here. This is a Vermont grade B. And you can see the difference between this and this is that the grade B is much darker. This is what we made in our first batch last night. which is somewhere between these two grades. Now, the reason that it's darker is not because it tastes any worse, or the reason that this is lighter, I should say, isn't because it tastes any better. It's just because it's cooked for less time, so there's been less caramelization of the sugar. Okay? So, basically, these over here, the fancy ones and the lighter ones, started off from the beginning with more sugar in the sap. So it took less time to evaporate out the water. Okay? So if you want to sample some of the stuff we made last night, you're welcome to.
Oh yeah, you got to sample some of that, Brooke.
I'll have a sample of that.
So go ahead and grab a cup.
Oh, I think I'm going to have to try some of this too.
Go ahead and tell us what you think. There's a little bucket over there that you can throw away the empties in.
Oh yeah, I like this.
It's kind of like sour.
Sour?
No.
You don't think it's sweet?
Oh yeah.
Sometimes the hot stuff it kind of looks like and you feel it's kind of like cold.
Right.
That is cool.
So does anybody have any questions?
How long have you been doing this?
Me personally?
Yeah.
I've been at Hale Farm for 6 years, been part of this program for 6 years, since '99.
Wow.
Yeah, and
Thank you, sir. Nice job.
yeah, well, thank you.
How many thousands of gallons of syrup do you think you've made if you had to make an estimate?
Well, actually, the past couple years we haven't been geared towards production. This year we hope to make quite a bit. We're going to try to actually make production. Last couple years it's been just more the educational side of things. In fact, the last 2 years we didn't make any, because what you have to do is keep the fire going, and after we're only open from 10 to 4. That's 6 hours. So if you really want to produce, you have to keep it going and stay into the night. Well, we volunteered to meet Brian and myself. Brian was in here earlier, volunteered to actually stay here last night and make some syrup, and we're going to continue to do throughout the season.
What makes a good production season for the trees?
It's all...
I mean, a hot summer, a wet summer, a cold summer, what? And is it the summer or is it the fall?
Well,
the winter that makes a good syrup crop?
There's a whole lot of factors. The rain is a factor, the weather, and what you want most of all is to have days in the 40s and nights below freezing, because once it gets to be too warm and the trees start to bud, your season's over with.
Really? So,
Yep.
and so when does the season, I mean, a normal season, when would it start, what month, what time of month, and when would it end?
You can tap the trees at the end of January.
Yeah.
And the sap starts flowing on days like, if you remember Tuesday, it was real nice.
I saw that on some of the tree lawns. Some of the trees were actually bleeding in the suburbs yet.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And we had a good collection that day, but the last couple of days it's been too cold. It's the sap's not flowing in the tree, so we haven't had anything. But you can go all the way well into March. It's all about when the trees really start shooting leaves out. That's when you have to end.
And there's nothing toxic and hazardous for you to stand in here all day and multiple years breathing this steam?
No, it keeps me looking younger, gives me a good complexion.
It is like a sauna, isn't it?
Yeah, and no wrinkles in my clothing either.